Hi, I'm Alison Beckles, and you are listening to Best Fails, the podcast where we share our stories of failure, explore their impact, and reflect on what we've learned. Today's guest is Sean Ifill, who discovered that transitioning from an employee to an entrepreneur required a mindset shift far beyond just changing his job title. Let's get into it. Don, welcome to Best Fields. It is such a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you.
Especially considering that we have known one another for almost 50 years now. Like maybe since
Well,
2010,
if he's
2011.
longer, if he's much longer.
Forever. Hey, you have been in my life forever, Sean. But in all kinds of ways. Work, church, all kinds of different ways.
Yep. Probably that's the reason why it feels that we've known each other for forever. Yeah.
I think
It's the
so.
second
I
law.
think
Yeah.
so. Exactly. But the audience, they don't have any idea. I mean, some of them will know you, and others don't. So what I'm going to do is just give them a little bit of a brief about who you are professionally, and then we can get into more of the personal bits. So Sean Eiffel brings leadership to design strategy, marketing coordination, and branding. With over 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship, tech startups, and design education. He has a reputation for his keen insight in synergizing different design specialisms to help build effective brands and marketing strategies. So, with expertise in brand development, product packaging and design, indigenous cultural design, multi platform publications, and social media strategy, this has made him a sought after designer locally, regionally, and internationally. And I know this because he has done much work with me and my company. He studied graphic design at the Barbados Community College, where he won the inaugural Award of Excellence and went on to further his studies at the Surrey Institute of Art and Design, now known as the University for the Creative Arts in the UK, where he received his Master's of Arts in Design Management. As an award-winning, multifaceted designer, his achievements include winning second place in the Barbados National Innovation Awards in 2006 and several logo competitions across the Caribbean. He currently runs Barbadian design consultancy Gateway Design 4 and is a tutor and lecturer at the Center for the Visual and Performing Arts in the Department of Fine Arts at the Barbados Community College. He also serves as head of design and smart content for EdTech startup Global Tutoring Hub. So, this is who we have on today, Sean, who's got a wealth of experience. So that gives you a little bit insight of what his professional life is, but we are going to delve into the personal. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, your
All right.
family life, those types of things.
I had to take off my glasses because when you started reading that bio, I was like, who is she talking about?
Oh, is this for I know?
Yeah, well, I'm from a relatively big family. I say relatively because I hear people talking about they come from 10 and 13. No,
All right.
I'm one of out of six children.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the oldest. One of the things that characterized my childhood is the fact that we grew up basically in two countries. My mom is from Grenada and my father is Barbadian.
Yes.
So for the first 10 years we lived in Barbados. And then my parents being pastors, they took up a pastorate in Grenada. And the
Right.
family spent another 11 years in Grenada. So that kind of characterized us in having that experience of both growing up in Barbados and growing up in Grenada. And, and when people ask us where we're from, we proudly say we're from Barbados. But
Barbados,
equally,
yeah.
we, we,
Yes.
we, we proudly say we have Grenadian heritage. So
Of
if
course.
if you're like the fly on the wall in our family, there will be occasions where we just break out into Grenadian dialect with colored with
Aye.
Grenadian phrases and ideas and whatnot. So yeah, we definitely got the best of both worlds.
Oh, that
So
is so
that's
wonderful.
what characterized my childhood a lot. Another thing too was we were very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So
Tell me about this.
um, so my first introduction to being competitive was when I found out I came first in class
Mm-hmm.
one in primary school.
Aye.
So it's like, oh, so
Uh-huh.
I can run with the
The big
talks.
boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my other siblings, they followed suit.
They were like, if he
So
coming first, then we got to come first too. I mean.
there you go, there you go. So we were always the type of family that kind of pushed academic excellence. We were also the kind of family where we cherished the small things, the things that you might consider insignificant. So even things like toys that we had, or um, things that we would do together, like helping to bake or be in the garden. That's the sort of thing. Um, and we all were always challenged to try and help out the family situation. Never thinking for yourself. I mean, yeah, the time will come where you will think for yourself, but it was always colored by, yeah, we want to make sure that we help the family out. So yeah.
Oh, whoa. That's nice. So then tell me, because this is a podcast about failure. So what would you say is your earliest memory of failure?
All right. So my boy talked about being introduced to academic excellence with coming first in class one.
Yes.
So Mr. Man came fourth in class two.
Uh-huh.
All I can
Uh-huh.
remember is feeling devastated, feeling hurt. I was like, oh my goodness, how could this happen? So the rest of my
Right.
story in primary school was trying to get back um,
To
to the
that
first
first.
position. So yeah,
And that's
that's my earliest recollection of failure.
Listen, I think there's a Caribbean thing, because one of the other podcasters was also talking about like one of her earliest memories of failure had
Mm,
to do with academics as well, where
okay.
like she would she would be coming second in class, and her mother would always ask her, so what happened that you ain't coming first? And she was saying that when she looked back at her notes, when she looked back at her old record, she was coming second with like 98 and 99%. And
Wow.
mom is still
Wow.
asking she,
Oh,
what
you're right.
happened?
Yeah.
That you
Yeah. Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
this is the
Rough up
Caribbean.
in there.
Caribbean parents say, listen, we send
Yeah.
you to
Yeah.
school to be the best.
Indeed.
That
Indeed.
is what
Indeed. That's it.
that is it. The best is first. That's it.
Yes. Yeah. 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 A song we've heard many times.
Exactly.
Although, what my
Exactly.
parents often would tell us, it wasn't about coming first, it was just about doing your best.
I
So,
love that.
yeah. Yeah.
Which kind of leads me then into the next question, which has to do more around with how did people react to failure within your community?
Um, I think as well, when you say community, I'm thinking Barbados or Caribbean. Um,
Yeah.
we
Or you
tend
can even
to
think about it because you grew up in Barbados and Grenada, like what
right.
those two
Yeah.
communities, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's a kind of mixed bag. Growing up, failure was not necessarily seen in a positive light. It was more seen as, all right, it happens, move from it, or get through it, that kind of thing. But never seen in context of, oh, this can actually help build your character. It can actually help you have an appreciation of other people's situations and circumstances. I think we are now kind of coming into that um, in a safer space. But my experience, it has often been negative, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that our societies are relatively small. So the idea of someone failing and being able to recover from that, we tend to more recall the failure than the success.
Yes.
But I
Yeah,
think a lot
yeah,
of that
yeah.
is because of how close and how small our societies are. Um,
Yeah.
but I think as our I guess with technology and the fact that a lot of our communities are exposed to im- immigration to like North America, Europe, Australia, even um, because your worldview has to be bigger. It kind of changes how you look at failure. And then when you
Yeah.
hear the other stories of people that we think, oh, they're so successful because we hear the end
Yes.
story. But then when we hear
Yeah.
the whole story, it's like, oh, okay,
Oh.
so yeah. So growing up, it, failure was looked at in a negative light, but I think as we become more and more exposed to other person's experiences, we kind of change how we look at failure.
Yeah, and I hear that because as you were talking, the thought that was in my head is even like for me, like growing up, failure. You kind of use the words of you move on from that. Failure was
Mhm.
that thing that you wanted to move on from. You didn't
Yeah,
stay. You didn't ask yourself, well,
right,
what can I do differently for next time? You
right.
didn't
Yes,
interrogate it
yes,
in that way. It
yes,
was like, how far can I get away from this thing, this
yes,
pain?
yes, yeah, yeah. Hit the nail on the head. Yeah. And I found
Yes.
even with in the context of business,
Yeah.
um, and I'm thankful for a forum like this because
Yeah.
even the title of it is like best fails,
Best our
but
fails.
how did the two meet? Well,
Exactly.
yeah, I think is important um to be able to not just appreciate that there's a place for failure, but being able to do the hard and difficult thing and look at it and say, okay,
Mm,
this happened. What can I learn from it?
exactly. And we're gonna get into your story and some of that, like what happened, what can you learn from it a little bit. But first, we've got a game to play,
Oh boy.
Sean. We've got a game
Ah.
to play. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna choose some cards from
Hmm.
our stack of cards from Where Should We Begin? And because I am the host and I really should be kind of nice, I'm gonna ask the question and go first to give you some time to think about it. So I'll take
Okay.
that pressure onto myself so that you have some time to think. This is it. And it says, an experience that shaped who I am that few people know about. An experience that shaped who I am that few people know about. When I was in primary school, there was this girl who I considered my best friend. And I absolutely loved her. And we would go home on evenings because we kind of lived close together. And we would leave, perfect, saying, see you tomorrow, see you whenever. And then the next day I would come to school and the girl would talk to me. Like she would say nothing to me at all. And I would be in my
Why does that
mind.
sound like early signs of bipolar?
I didn't know what it was. In my mind, I'd be begging back and saying, if I do anything, did I say or do anything to hurt you? I'm sorry, like let me just be friends. And this was happening for a while. And then after a while, I tell myself, you got to stop this, Alison. You gotta stop this.
Hmm.
This
Hmm.
isn't
This ain't
helpful to
helpful.
nobody.
No.
If she want to be your friend, she'll be your friend.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
fact that she does this, that y'all are good, she
yeah.
has gone home. There is nothing that you could have done in between that time because y'all are not interacting. She does not
Hmm.
want to be your friend. So
Hmm.
stop putting yourself and her through
Yeah.
that and just leave it. And
Wow.
that has very much shaped my approach to relationships. And if time and situations and circumstances start to pull us apart, I am not one of those persons who can try to hold on forever.
Yeah.
I
Be my
I am
friend.
not.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I am not that person because that could result in all kinds of pains and heartaches and stuff like that. As
yeah.
opposed to it nicely eases, and then maybe if you come back around, you can pick up. It's no pain to pick up.
So I worked at a bank,
Mm-hmm.
and in this particular transaction, I had overpaid a customer. It was a significant amount. When I realized what happened, the fear of God struck me.
I could imagine. I worked in
I
the
was like,
bank. I
what
know how
do
that
I do?
works.
Suppose the person is dishonest and they say,
Yes.
well, you didn't give me there, but clearly.
Yes.
So I clearly had the sense to go and let his supervisor know because I figured the quicker someone in authority knows, the better my chances, even if it might cost me my job. So I did. The person tactfully told me what to do, and I did what they had instructed, and the monies was recovered. And what that taught me is at some point in time, there are people who you need to confide in, particularly in difficult situations. And And I think sometimes what scares a lot of people is when they hear the horror stories of people who have shared information, the people who they thought would have had their best interests at heart, and then it just turned out to make the whole matter worse. Sometimes people get very, I can work this out my way,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
oftentimes it actually makes the situation worse. So sometimes they
Yeah.
feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. But yeah,
Yeah.
you need people who you can trust and confide in. And for me, as a believer, God is number one, and He will show you who it is that you need to speak.
Yeah. That's a very good one. So that brings us to the end of question time. So it's
Yeah,
at this time, Sean, that you tell us about your best film, that you give us that story and
yeah,
share this experience with us. So
yeah.
over to you completely.
Well, my story is actually with one of these startups that
Yeah.
I serve as a part of. Um, it was a situation where we were in the best of worlds. The startup at that point in time probably was like 3, 4 years old.
Mhm.
And according to the statistics, that's the time when your startup should really take off. And things were shaping up that kind of way. Um, we had just secured, well, I can't say a contract, but yeah, a contract for a certain type of business. And we were positioning ourselves to kind of make the startup a little more financially solid
Mhm. Mhm.
by positioning ourselves for another contract. Um, so just to give you an idea of the numbers, um, if we had gotten through the contract, we would have been able to earn 250,000 US dollars in 3 months.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the only drawback would have been at that time is having enough uh, monies to do what we needed to on the ground in the US and get the contract in, earn the monies, and then go from there.
Yeah.
As fate would have it, in that same time window, one of our biggest clients at that time, they changed their business model.
Mhm.
And in changing the business model, it meant that we were going to lose a substantial amount of our revenue. As a
Right.
matter of fact, in that time window, we lost like 80% of our revenue.
Wow.
So that was a
And this is
very,
in a 3 month window,
in
you
the
said?
change 3 month window. So all of these are things that were happening and transpiring in that window.
Wow.
So it became a situation where we obviously did not have the capital to take advantage of the opportunity in the US. And where we were financially was not the best because first platform, so to speak, that we had in the US to kind of help us get a firmer financial footing,
Yeah.
it was not as easy as we thought it would have been.
Right.
Actually, so just to set up how it was a best field, we were trying to set up a business in one of the largest malls in Florida. And we submitted the proposal and we got a response.
Mm-hmm.
And an interview followed. And they responded and said they have never seen such a well written proposal before for the type of business that the space that we were trying to get.
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
okay, the two big company from Barbados, we shining bright like a diamond in the
Come
US.
on.
So we had gotten the space, we had gone through setting up of the business, had a launch, had training of employees, but it so happened that it was a lot more than we had anticipated it to be. And as a result, because we were basically like putting all of our eggs in one basket, hoping that this
Mm.
opportunity would give us the open door financially,
Yeah.
because it took so long. Um, for it to be profitable, it would have taken a little longer than we would have wanted to. And then comes the 3 month window with 80% revenue being lost and the opportunity.
Yes.
So the conversation became, all right, so what do we do? Because at that point in time, as directors of the company, we still had employees. And because we were still in the hopeful space, thinking that some opportunity would come true, because there were other opportunities that we had,
Yeah.
but not as big
Yeah.
as that one. Um, Nothing really transpired. So we came to the place where we were actually not taking our salary to make
Right.
sure that the employees that we still had on board that they were being paid. So that made it a very difficult season to be in. And then we had to make that difficult decision of if it is worth us still keeping the company running in the hope that something would come true, or if
Yeah.
we will continue racking up costs
Yeah.
that we don't know we will be able to cover.
Yeah.
And so we had to make the difficult decision of closing the startup. That was probably one of the most difficult seasons in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point in time, I was thinking, yeah, this was the big opportunity. This was the big
Yeah.
window that would have put me in a place to make all my dreams come true,
Of
to
course.
help my
Of course.
family be in a better financial position, to
Yeah.
be able to travel the world and the seven
Of
seas.
course. Yeah.
But it didn't work out. And then on top of that, to be having to deal with the after effects of a failed business.
Mm-hmm.
You had persons that you owed money, you had debts that you still had to cover, you had persons who you felt that you disappointed them. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a real difficult time for me. If I didn't know better, I think I probably went into depression because
Wow.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
not in a good place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I'm glad now I can look back in retrospect and see and learn from that season.
Yeah.
Because I still went into another startup afterwards.
What is like one of the biggest lessons that was a takeaway for you?
Well, funny enough, I think now in retrospect, there probably were some lessons from the first startup that I should have carried over into the second startup,
Mm-hmm.
which I did not. So I'm still
Right.
learning.
Of
Uh,
course, continuous process.
but I think one of the things I learned that's for me as an individual um, was making that transition from being an employee to being an employer or an owner of a business with people and a larger portfolio. Because up until that point, from the first startup, I either would have been an employee, um, and then I went into a season of being self-employed, but it would not have been anything on the scale of being a part of a startup. Um, so there were certain things I needed to change in terms of expectations, responsibilities, outlook, um, what I needed to throw my energy into that I did not learn at that point in time. Don't mind it was an excellent team. Sometimes I can even hear some of the things that were being said and being told ringing in my head, and it's like, Sean, you learn, you learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was one lesson for me, making that transition from being self-employed to being a owner, director in a business.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I learned and I'm learning is how to build a team in terms of the task that you have. Because coming out of the self-employed space, you're basically the chief cook and bottle
Cook and
washer.
bottle washer.
So coming to the place of understanding that for the business to work, you need to train other people with the mindset that they need to replace you and you go and take something else or something higher. Um, I don't think I learned that. I'm learning that. Um, Another area that I think I would have learned from that first startup as well is the importance of having vision, but a vision that you understand that you can revise. Because I think I still had the mentality that, or if that's the vision and it's a 15-year vision, that whatever I wrote down in 2025 is supposed to be the same vision in 2040. Not realizing, no, you may have to tweak it and change it. So for me, I don't think I had that understanding of what a vision is supposed to be. Yeah, if you radically change your vision, then you probably have to have some other types of conversations. But yeah, understanding that it is something changeable, yeah,
Gotta tweak it.
yeah.
Well,
So, so
I,
those were those were my top three.
takeaways, and there are two very good takeaways because I can't remember who said it, but is kind of like a systems thinking thing where if you operate in a system, there are particular things about the system that either draws things out of you or you impact the system in a particular way. So if
Yeah,
you come into a system where you are supposed to be operating at director level, owner level, or whatever, but you're operating at employee level, then that entire system is
it's gonna
impacted.
suffer. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, you talked about just differences in expectations and how you think about responsibilities.
Mhm,
Tell me a little bit about that. Like, what expectations did you come into the business with that you
mhm.
thought perhaps, no, that you're looking back, may not have been the right types of expectations?
Well, I think for me, the main one was probably my downfall, and that was the pitch that was given to me to be a part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they were trying to be deceptive, but I think
Yeah.
I kind of came in with the incorrect lens. And the bait for me
Right.
was, Sean, we can be able to. You ain't gotta worry about having a salary. You're gonna have like
Right.
a fixed amount being covered.
Yes.
But I did not make the mental transition that, yeah, that might be the case because my area of expertise in the business wasn't one of the major revenue earners.
Yeah.
But I don't think I appreciated the fact that it meant my revenue earning potential would increase a lot more.
Right.
And I think I kind of capped that because I still was looking at it through the lens of it's just me that's trying to facilitate it, as opposed to I need to build a team so that instead of having to deal with just 3 clients, I can deal with 20 clients.
Got it. Got
So,
it.
so I think my blind spot probably was how efficient I was as an employee. And by
Right.
that I mean I would often get comments like, "Oh boy, you get Sean stuff and you get it fleshed out." And sometimes I can take it and multiply it, that sort of thing. But that was just Sean Ifill doing Sean Ifill stuff. And I think there were opportunities for me to understand the team building dimension that I did not grasp, but I did not see it. I think the challenge for me is the team that I was a part of. These people were the best at their game.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little part of me that felt like playing catch up. So I felt I had a
Mm-hmm.
point to prove or a point to
Mm-hmm.
make.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, probably a little hubris stepped in
I mean,
there.
we all got a little bit of hubris. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
instead
it,
of
yeah.
instead of being teachable, and not that I was not teachable, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
think my eyes were open to opportunities to learn certain things. I
And
think
I think
that
that's probably because of the lens that you were talking about that you would have
yes,
you would have got you
yes,
would have went it with.
correct,
And I think too,
correct.
like what happens when we find ourselves in situations where we are not very comfortable, we tend to lean very heavily on the strengths, the areas that we are very
Yes,
comfortable with, that we know we
yes,
do well. But the
yes,
problem is, overused strength becomes a weakness. It
yes,
becomes a
yes,
handicap. And
yes.
so you've got to step back and
Yeah.
embrace the discomfort of the
Yep.
things you're not accustomed to.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. And we
yeah,
often think negatively when persons try to point out our weaknesses, even if they're doing
yeah,
it in a very tactful way, but we don't see it's
yeah,
like, I see what you're trying to do there. And instead of understanding what they're trying to impart to you. You get offended and you get more into that tunnel
Yeah.
vision, which works against you. Like for
Yeah.
me, a
Yeah.
case in point, one of the other directors used to keep making this point in different fora and in different conversations. Sean, you need to start building out your team. You need to start looking for people to hire. And honestly, a part of it, I felt offended because I was interpreting it through the lens of, wow, you don't want me to be a part of the team anymore. When nothing could have been further from the
Ah,
truth.
yeah.
It was
Yes.
more that, Sean, I see you're trying to give 100%. I see you're trying to do your best, but it is not a one-man show. You need to get
Yeah.
additional
A
people.
team.
But I think
Yes.
what
Yes.
kind of blinded me from that too is I didn't think that because I still wanted to appreciate the fact that even though the area of services that I was providing for the startup was not the major revenue earner, it was still critical to the operations of the business. So there wasn't that understanding, I think, from my point of view, that building out a team, yes, you may think that you are not earning enough revenue to have a team, but you have to start somewhere. Somewhere.
Right.
So
Yeah.
maybe the spark that would have helped me appreciate, okay, yeah, you need to have more clients, you need to facilitate your clients more efficiently. Part of parcel of that is hiring more people. And maybe that would have given some positive pressure in that when I start to flesh out and look for new clients, I know I have a team to help with facilitating the additional work. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think back then of that situation, what would you say was the hardest part that you had to come to grips with?
Fail the company failing. I think, yeah,
Right.
having to I didn't see it as a positive because of how much was invested in it. And
Yeah.
again, in the Caribbean, we really don't see failure in a positive light, particularly
Hmm.
if there are people close to you that may be hurt, whether directly or indirectly, because they're families
Hmm.
that you're trying to support by the persons that you hire
Yeah.
or work with. There are companies that you may owe monies to that you're going to find some way to
Yeah.
pay
Yeah.
their debts that you're dealing with. So sometimes you're not in a space where you feel, okay, yeah, this is a failure, but we can survive this.
Yeah.
Another thing that kind of makes failure more difficult in the Caribbean context is that I am one of those people who think our infrastructure, our
Hmm.
ecosystem for small
Business.
businesses, startups, is not the most healthy. Let me put it that way. Because I do believe Barbados is, and the Caribbean by extension, is now getting a grasp of what it means to have a startup and an entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Hmm.
But a lot of the times, the amount of failure
Yeah.
you have to go through to get to that place of success, or the hoops and the energy that you have to spend just to get basic things done,
Hmm.
persons are more tempted to go and look for another 9 to 5 job than
Yes.
they are to try again and
Yes.
start a
Yeah.
business. Or
Yeah.
even if they start a business, to be able to grow it to a place where it starts to employ people, has more locations in other territories. Don't mind we have all the technology, but the infrastructure and the ecosystem, it really doesn't help, particularly if you have to come from the ashes of failure.
Yeah. And one of my theories for that too is also because within the Caribbean we don't particularly have like a lot of financial resources. Like we don't have the financial resources that you may find like here in the UK or in the US or wherever
Yeah,
to
yeah.
support. And I think that's also one of the reasons why too sometimes failure has such a might have such a
Sting.
stench on it
Yeah,
because because people are is almost this perception of we only have this limited amount of money. We got to make sure that we do the best with it. It does not come with the understanding of this is the a startup inherently is going to have
Risk.
things of failure.
Yeah.
Exactly, it will have risk, which is why startups need such big investment because they need the space to
Yeah.
actually have the
Yes.
failures, learn,
Yes.
and continue to in order for the
Correct.
company to
And
do well.
not just the company too, but sometimes the individual and the number of
Yeah.
failures that they have, because you
Yes.
often hear the comment like, "Oh, well, he never had a good business, or she never had any business that took off," not realizing that there are stories out there of people who have failed businesses 30 times. And when we hear
Before
the
they fall.
names, we were like, "Huh? Really?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we tend to penalize failure. And by that, I mean, like, I took interesting note over the last few months where I have come across either statements in documentation or newspaper articles or situations where failure is frowned upon. So, like, for example, I came across documents that say, well, this person cannot be selected to be on a board or run for a certain post if they file for bankruptcy. I was like, oh, so even
Listen.
filing for bankruptcy is a stain on any opportunities or any roles that you can take in the wider society. So already there's stumbling blocks put in front of you by virtue of you
Yes.
filing for bankruptcy.
And it's almost as if
It
failure is a
immoral.
moral failing. Yes.
Yes, yes,
As
yes,
opposed to this person has gone through bankruptcy. They know the choices that they've made. They know the situations that brought them to this point. They
yeah.
are well able, they are better able than anybody who has not
Just
experienced it to
yes,
see, look, this, you see this here? You see what we're
yes.
doing here, so
You're right.
I have
We need
seen
to
this
stretch. Yes,
already, and the outcome
yes.
is
Right, right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well is within society, and I guess because of social media and so forth, and I think maybe or maybe I curate my social media in a particular way,
Hmm.
but things like social media, because we doing such small videos, we work with pictures and so forth,
Hmm.
there is a tendency to focus on moments, and the moments that we tend to focus on are the moments that are our high moments. So
Yes.
we take the moments that we see and we make assumptions of what
Yeah.
this moment means. So we don't
Yes.
see all of the waves and
Right.
the flows
Yes.
that get people
Yes.
to this moment. We only ever
Correct.
see the
Correct.
moment, and that
Yes.
entire story is missing as to
Yeah.
how that moment was achieved.
Correct. Correct.
and
Correct.
and that's a problem. That's a problem because then people in the background, when they also then to start to have experience hardships and
Mm-hmm.
experience failures and so forth, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wait, this is normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
a terrible at this,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that every other body still went through
Still
that
had.
same process, but
Yes.
you only
Yes.
ever see that high note. You only
Yeah.
ever see the high note.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
So, what were some of the things that helped you to recover from this experience of failure that you had?
um, I think probably two things. One, yeah, the business has failed, but the bill's still there. You still have to live. You still have to put food on the table. So there's that. And then
Yes.
two, more often than not, when you get involved in a startup or in a business, if it is not driven by a passion to see something come to pass, even if it was
Mm.
painful, there's still that thing in you that if an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
comes, you can be like, I went through all this pain again, but I could try again. I must
Right.
tell you, it was there was a window for me. I think probably I did not get
Yeah.
involved in another startup until two, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I was still an entrepreneur, I still was involved in business. So even though it would have been, the feeling would have been me trying to claw myself out of a hole, so
Yeah.
to speak,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
when the opportunity presented presented itself, I took it. So yeah, for me, those are probably the two,
The two things.
the two
So,
that yeah.
because those are very interesting things. Was it
Hmm.
that the reality of your life just kind of helped grounded you, and life is going on? Like,
Yeah,
this is not the end. Life is
yeah,
still continuing. So you
yes.
don't have the space to wallow.
No, I mean, wallow I did, but it's like, yeah, this,
Yeah.
this,
Because you
it
got
got to be wallow with
you see,
reality in view.
you
Yeah.
wallow with reality. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Cause
yeah.
it hurt. It hurt.
Yeah,
So
that
I mean, when you're
hurts.
invested in something, when you put your tech, I mean, there were nights that we went without sleep to make sure that we had projects completed to satisfy clients. And so once you are that invested in something and it fails, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, it can't be an indefinite wallowing.
Wallow. Yeah. But you gave yourself space though to feel
I
the
did
wallow
give
because it
myself
felt like for two
space.
and a
I
half
had to.
years. Yeah. You
Yeah,
give,
yeah.
which is
Al-
important because I
Although
think,
in that space, I still had to be doing work. So
yes,
because the beneficial thing for me was that even though the startup failed, I still had my design consultancy that I could salvage. Don't mind one or two
yes,
clients I had lost because I was invested in the startup and I actually
right.
channeled some of them through that.
Through the
But
startup, yeah.
yeah, so that was basically what I was able to lay back on after the failure. Um,
Right.
so it wasn't like 100% hopeless, no opportunity
Yeah,
to earn a revenue or whatnot. And I still, at that time, I was still a part-time tutor at the
yeah,
community college. So there was still
yeah.
something that could help me
Yes.
get food on the table, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. But I do think that that's an important important statement to make because sometimes I think because situations are so painful, sometimes you rush to get past the pain
Yeah.
and haven't allowed yourself to process it. You haven't
Hmm.
allowed yourself to learn the lesson. I haven't
Hmm.
allowed yourself to grieve the loss of something because it
Yeah.
is a real thing. It isn't
Yeah.
because it may not be a person or whatever. You
Right.
have invested your energy, your time. Is a dream that you had that now you've got to lay to rest. So you've got
Hmm.
to take that time to actually
Hmm.
process that. And I think that that
Correct.
is an important point for people to hear. That
Yes.
take the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
wallow a little bit, just a
Yes.
little bit. You know, you
Correct.
still got
Correct.
to live life, but
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
that space.
Correct. Go eat the KFC at 12 midnight if you have to. But
Exactly. Whatever that version for you is, do it. When you think back about, especially that 3 month period where so many things happen in that 3 month period, we using hindsight is
hmm
2020.
hmm
If you put on the lens of a director, of the owner of a business, and look back at that time period,
hmm
and say you had to be advising yourself, so you are
hmm
mentoring yourself through this process,
Yeah.
what questions would you ask yourself, or what things would you tell yourself to maybe bring up with the team or to be on the lookout for if you had
Actually,
to mentor yourself?
when you were asking the question,
Uh-huh.
an individual actually came to my mind. Not even the questions I would
Really?
ask. And
Okay.
he was my best friend before, and he
Yes.
was my best
Uh-huh.
friend after. And
Right.
he was the person who basically had like the pulse on the company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was often the person who people on the outside looking in would say or ask, "Why you so pessimistic? Why you don't think positively?
Right.
why he had his hand on certain things, and he
Yes.
saw certain things in the horizon, and he would
Right.
often be the person, I think, was the person to say, all right, there's some things ringing the bell. There's some things we need to
Yes.
address. There needs we
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
speak to. But
Yeah.
he wasn't the chief decision maker.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So some of the questions that would often arise would be, all right, where are we in terms of the vision, the mission of the company? Um, are we able to cover these costs in a best case scenario and a worst case scenario? Um,
Mm-hmm.
do we need this particular cost or investment that we're trying to make? And,
Mm-hmm.
and if the rest of the team says yes, if things go down south, are we in a position to handle it or deal with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think for me, yes, some of those questions that that person was asking should have been questions that I heard and also tried to answer, but from the perspective of being one of the directors who had to give
Director
an
is no.
answer to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think, but this what you said though just now made me think. I did a webinar either last week or week before. One of the questions that they asked was had to do with if you're on a team, something along the lines of would you rather be with somebody who is optimistic or pessimistic? So
Hmm.
my response was along the lines of I want the optimist, but I don't want an optimist with their head in the clouds. I want
Right.
an optimist with a good dose of reality because
Yes. Yes.
those hard questions are
Hmm.
and are so necessary to
Yeah.
have asked and to have an
Yes.
answer to,
Yes.
and it does not mean that the person does not think that this is a good job or that we could do it or that we shouldn't
Yeah.
do it. But it is if we are going to do it, then we need to fully understand the risks. We need to fully understand
Yeah.
the context of what we're getting into so that we can
Yes.
go into it better. You need to
With
be
the
able to
eyes
go
open.
with your eyes open,
Correct.
exactly, as opposed to head in the clothes, and
Yeah.
then you got a whole army behind you ready to pull down your pants and all kind of things, and you have
Yes.
no idea that's going because your
Yes.
head in the clothes.
Indeed. Indeed.
So
Indeed. Indeed. And we
yeah.
had those moments. Trust me.
Mm-hmm. A moment of what heads in the clothes of
Heads in the clothes. How you termed it? Are we there ready to pull your
somebody
pants?
pulling down your pants.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is the startup had several dimensions to it. We had partnerships with other businesses. We
Yeah.
had our own in-house team. Um, we had our clients. So there were lots of audiences that it was in their best interest to know if we were around for the long term or if
Yeah.
we were just a flash in the pan.
Right.
Um, so when that failure, I mean, thankfully everything did not crash
Yeah.
overnight,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but because it happened over a phase period, where you would have those persons who were angry, frustrated, or whatnot. It
Yeah.
often was a case of like one person today, another person tomorrow, another person next week, as opposed to everybody coming down and crashing down on you. And by people, I
Yeah.
mean like
Yeah.
investors, contractors. Thankfully, we had a team that was understanding because we kind of tried to keep them informed of certain things
Of what was
so that they
happening.
would
Yeah.
know, okay, well, this is the best case scenario, this is the worst case scenario. If you need to get another job, we won't hold it against you. But if you decide to hold on, we will try the best to make sure that you're covered. So it was not one of those easy transitions to go through. But
Yeah.
I think the 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 head in the clouds bit was the successes that we had. I mean, we had some awesome times. We had some experiences and some exposure that was out of this world. I mean, when I talk
Wow.
about the response that we got from that company, we have written their
From the
proposal
yeah.
to when they were like bowled over by the proposal. I mean, that was like coming just before the days of when we went to that
Every
period. There
yeah.
were times where we would take trips um, to trade fairs and to exhibitions
Mm-hmm.
and to places that kind of open your
Mm-hmm.
horizons to start to think globally, to start to think outside of the
Yes.
box. Um, I am benefiting from a lot of, yeah, probably that's another thing I should mention too. The exposure that we
Uh-huh.
got, I benefit from that all like no. I mean, even to this day, I share
Wow. Yeah.
well, one of the many stories that I was exposed to at one of the shows we had gone to. There was this trade show called
Mm-hmm.
the Consumer Electronics Showcase. that's held every
Mm-hmm.
year in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And the year that we had gone, I remember going to one of the um, talk shows came to my head, but it wasn't. Well, yeah, actually, it was a talk show that was
Maybe like one of
recording
these
at the.
seminars or yes. Yeah.
Yes, and this guy was sharing his story in terms of being a startup. No, at that point in time, when he shared his story, his company was worth 30 million US dollars.
Well, nice.
But before, he said he had to pitch his company to over, and he called a ridiculous number in the hundreds too.
Uh-huh.
And he
Uh-huh.
maxed out something like over 300 credit cards. I was like, I ain't care how good my idea is. I am not maxing out no 300 credit cards. But to me, what I said is that's how much he believed in the idea that he had,
His
and
yeah.
he knew it could work. Hence, why he
Yes.
took the risk. I don't think it was just like,
Yes.
oh, I just have this bright idea and I feel it must work. I think he did his homework and he
Yes.
recognized that all these costs that I
It
am
could
taking
work.
on, it
Yes.
will be paid back once I become
Yeah.
successful. So to hear those sort
Yeah.
of stories, I think, yeah, it kind of put you in the clothes.
Yeah.
Not understanding,
Yes.
yes, these people, they have stories, they have their successes, but when you are going through your failures, you have to put it in context. If not, it could run the risk of, I'm going to say destroying you. Um, I mean, in the sense of killing your entrepreneurship, your entrepreneurial
Right.
mindset, or your desire
Yeah.
to go and
Yeah.
do it again, go at
Yeah.
it again. So you need to be able to put those things in context. If not, it's going to be like I do not have the energy or the desire to go through this again.
Again.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I like to ask people is thinking back about the failure that they experienced. Is there a person or persons that were very helpful in helping you to navigate this period of failure?
For me, it would have started with some of the other partners that I was involved
Mm-hmm.
in the first
Yeah.
startup. Because even though there was a season where it's like, right about now, you're the last people I want to see. Um,
Yes.
I still, I still
They
had
understood.
connections. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they
So even
understood.
even one of the team members in the first startup, I was part of the second startup with one of those other team members. So there was
Yeah.
still life after that, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and we were friends before, so
Of
it was
course.
like it
Yes.
was difficult, it was challenging, but life continued. Um,
Yeah.
so there would be like past members of the team. Then there would have been clients who were with me throughout all the seasons before
Yeah.
startup, during the startup, after the
Yes.
startup. So
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
those people. Um, I should be saying my family, but
Uh-huh.
I think my family was always my foundation. So it wasn't a case I
Hmm.
went to them with all the details. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, I think for some of them, all they knew that the person that I was a part of, it no longer was there. But I don't think they knew all the pain and all the whatever
Yes. Yeah.
that went,
Yeah.
but they were
Yeah.
there, and I think
Yes.
that's critically important. Uh, that you have persons who are just there for you. They don't necessarily
Yeah.
interrogate you and want to know all of your business. So why you there? What you
Yeah.
could do
It might
with
just be
that?
the person that you could say,
Busy.
look, we can go and eat
Or
some ice
sometimes you
cream
don't,
in the
people
place.
that don't even ask you anything. They're just there for you. You
Exactly.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
for me, yeah, basically those three areas, those three
Good.
people that were there for
Nice.
me, that helped me
Yeah.
navigate through this season.
Yeah. So when you think about people who are looking to get into entrepreneurship, to launch a startup,
Mhm.
what based on the experience that you've had, based on your best fails, what advice would you give to them?
don't be afraid to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you feel that your questions are nosy, the worst somebody can tell you is no. I remember when I first started to waddle into the pool of entrepreneurship, one of the questions I often had was, how do I cost or price myself, my services, what I provide in the marketplace? And I think, again, another downside about trying to function in smaller economies is that everybody's just trying to keep their share because they
Yes.
ain't got that much to go around.
Yeah.
And one of the things people tend to keep to themselves is how much their services cost. So unless you are one of the people that go out front and ask, so how much do you charge
There.
to make a logo? How much do you charge to brand an event?
Yeah.
They aren't forthcoming. So,
Yeah.
but there are people who I think they understand and they appreciate what it means to be an entrepreneur, and they themselves had people who they asked questions and were given answers. So they
Yeah.
say, look,
Yeah.
I'm not going to lose because the more there are persons out there, the more I can be sure about what I am going to charge. Because
Yes.
I've heard persons often ask the question of how much do I charge because they often want to charge competitively, i.e., they want to charge low enough to be able to bring in enough clients.
That. Yeah.
But that's only part of the story. If you do not understand the value you bring to the marketplace, that increases the risk of you actually undervaluing what you charge in the marketplace. So one of the things I've
Listen.
found is even if I tell people like, all right, this is what I charge, but first of all, you need to know what it is you're bringing, what your value is, and charge based on that.
That this basically is it, Sean. Thank you so very much.
Wow.
Yes, for participating in Best Fields. Thank you so much, Sean, for telling your story. Now, if you want to connect with Sean, check out our show notes for his details. If you enjoy the podcast and want to support us, tell a friend or leave a review on your favorite podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Best Fields Podcast. If you have your own Best Fields story that you would like to share, send us an email at info@mybestfields.com. Have you had a similar experience to Sean? I would love to hear about it. What was your major takeaway from the experience? Write us a note or record a voice memo and send it to us at info@mybestfields.com, and we might just play it in a future episode. If you are navigating or processing a failure and would like a safe space to reflect and explore what it means for you, visit our show notes to book some time with me. Remember, shame dies when stories are told in safe places. Until next time.